Eye of the Face, Chapter 15. Sometimes I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Lewis Carroll. The town's clock tower, a mile in the distance, had just sounded at the mid-hour. It was 4:30, and Dr. Andrews stepped from the side room. A nurse woke up Weissman and told him Andrews was ready to see him. "Steve," called Weissman as he walked from the lobby. "Over here," said the doctor as he leaned against the wall. He pinched the bridge of his nose. He had obviously had a grueling few hours. "Steve, what happened?" asked Weissman as he came over. "It's been a long night, Bernie," he confessed as he blinked his eyes. "Well, where is she?" He looked into the side room. "She's been downstairs in the clinic for a couple of hours. She woke about an hour ago. I've spent that time trying to carefully piece this together with the assistance of Dr. Casey. By phone, of course. This whole thing, Marta," he said, taking a deep breath, "claims her husband murdered the entire DuPont family in quite graphic fashion." "Oh, God," said Weissman as he threw his hands up in the air. "I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know what's going on here, Steve. I just don't understand this." "Neither do I, Bernie. But Casey is the chief psychologist here, and he told me that her problem is extremely complex. He says, and I concur, that Marta believes that she really saw her family murdered out at the farm tonight." "Did you call Hastings?" "No, why should I?" "Well, what if they really were murdered?" "She's suffering from delusions. She told Casey about her flashes and other things that she saw. What makes you think this is any different, Bernie?" "So you're saying that she has no credence at all?" asked Weissman. "I say simply, let's just look at her past performance since she's arrived in St. Argus," Andrews told him. "Never mind her past instability." "I'm going to call Hastings," Weissman proclaimed as he headed toward the pay telephone. With Andrews watching, he dialed Hastings' home number. The chief's wife answered from their bed, and a few seconds later, Hastings came on the line. But Weissman kept talking, telling the chief what had just happened.
"She said what?"
exploded Hastings. "You heard me, Dan. They're all dead, according to Marta."
"Haven't you heard the story about the little boy who cried wolf, Bernie? How many times are you going to listen to her? For God's sakes, go home and get some sleep."
"I'm going out there right now, Dan. If I find anything, including anything she might have done, I'll be sure to mention it to the media when they swarm all over this town. I'll mention how the town's police chief slept through it all as a house full of people were butchered."
"Put Andrews on the phone."
"Dr. Andrews here."
"Steve, does her story hold water?"
"I personally don't think so, Dan, but..."
"Aha, that's what I thought."
clamored Hastings. "But it is possible."
"Tell Weissman to give me 10 minutes. I'll be down at the hospital to pick him up. Have him be out front."
"Right," said Andrews as he hung up the telephone. Daybreak was only a short time away as Hastings sped his cruiser down the highway. Andrews had related every detail of Marta's story to Weissman, who in turn informed the flustered Hastings. They neared the intersection of the highway and the road to the farmhouse. Hastings turned on the high beams and then pulled over near the stop sign. Weissman, desperately trying to vindicate Marta, leaped from the car and wandered over to the sign. Hastings shined the spotlight to the spot where Marta said the arm of her husband had been thrown from the car. "This is bullshit, you know," shouted Hastings as Weissman searched the area. "I don't see a damn thing," Weissman confessed. "Nothing." "Come on, Weissman. If there was a limb out there, you'd see it. Now get back in the car. Let's go wake the DuPonts." Hastings spun the tires and left rubber on the road as they proceeded directly to the farmhouse. Weissman went over the story one final time, but Hastings was still very skeptical. "What about the kids, Bernie?" "The kids are in a room in a basement clinic. Don't worry about the kids, Dan." "You know what I mean. If we don't find anything out there, and we won't, it means once and for all, Marta Pendleton is nuts. Nuts, Weissman. Flaco. Gonzo." Weissman did not bother responding. He just stared out at the purple-hued fields as the pre-dawn shadows cast an innocent beginning to the day. He could genuinely feel the wayward isolation of the little town. For years he had been trapped up here, looking for that elusive small-town togetherness, the cohesiveness, the network of interdependence, as the textbooks called it, but he never found it, or anything close to it. In fact, the decaying, closely packed city had given him more togetherness with his fellow human beings. In St. Argus, he had found divergent, interested power from the Pendletons on down to the poorest farmer. "Well, it looks quiet enough out here," said Hastings as he glanced at the farmhouse. "I don't see any bodies lying in the snow, Bernie, and the house looks just fine." "You don't know that for sure," replied Weissman, who now didn't even believe his own words. Hastings turned into the dirt driveway. There was no blood or shattered glass. If anything did happen outside, it had been cleverly covered over. The chief pulled up to the kitchen door and shut off the car. "I don't relish the fact of waking Al DuPont," he said as he stepped into the cool morning air. "Unless they're all dead, Bernie," he said sarcastically. "Let's just get in there, all right?" said Weissman as they crossed the ice to the front door. "Let me just tell you something. This is the absolute last time I'm going through this for that woman," Hastings told him. He turned and rapped on the kitchen door. They waited in silence, and their breath was white in the early morning cold. Inside, there appeared to be some noise, like someone shuffling toward the door. To no surprise to Hastings, the curtains were pulled back. The block-faced jar of Albert DuPont stared out at them. He twisted the deadbolt and removed the chain as he opened the door.
"What do you people want?"
he said with no inflection in his voice. "Hey, Al, can we talk to you for a second?" smiled Hastings, trying to be as amicable as possible at that early hour. He looked over to Weissman with an expression of smug delight, knowing he had been right about Marta all along.
"Why have you come out here at this time of the morning?"
"Why? Come on, Al, it's cold out here. We'll just be a few minutes," Hastings complained as he pushed his way inside. They entered the kitchen and DuPont slammed the door shut. The kitchen showed no signs of struggle. There was no blood or broken or scattered furniture, no dead, mutilated bodies. In fact, all was in order, just the way Mrs. DuPont always kept it. Hastings furrowed his brow. Now he had to explain why they had just burst into the farmhouse at 4:45 in the morning. As he was about to speak, all the others of the family filed into the room like wooden soldiers, very much alive with deadly serious expressions. "Oh, boy," exclaimed Hastings as he saw them.
"Marta isn't in bed.
Said Jamie with no emotion.
Has something happened to Marta?"
"What makes you say that, Jamie?" asked Weissman, who was amazed by their collective sour dispositions.
"Because she is missing,"
replied Jamie as if he was becoming angry. "She could be right here in the house for all you people know," yelled Weissman. Okay, said Hastings. "We know where she is. Look, Al, that's why I've come out here, because of Marta," he confessed, and they just stared at him like figures on a Grant Wood painting. "I don't think the details are necessary, Dan," said Weissman as he attempted to protect Marta. "We surely can see things are okay out here. Let's get back into town."
"What does he mean, things are all right?"
asked DuPont as if he were trying to provoke Weissman. "He means your daughter had another one of her flashes," said the chief. Once again, they showed little concern for what he said. "I said she just had another flash."
"What did she see?"
asked Jamie with a slight grin. "Well, she claims," began Hastings, not knowing how to word it. She claims that you were all murdered."
"I hardly think so,"
said Jamie.
"And just who did the killing?"
he asked, and kept an eye on Weissman's reaction. "Well, she said that you did the killing," said Hastings. Jamie smiled wider than before, but in a frozen, immovable grin, and then his face reverted back to its serious demeanor.
"I killed us all, did I? I do think it is time for the sanitarium. Dear little Marta has to be put away for her own good.
Cutting her off will do nothing but hurt her, cried Weissman as he stepped forward. He was incensed at their attitudes. She needs long, methodical treatment and understanding.
In the sanitarium,
said Janie, provoking Weissman even more. Locking her up won't do that. Why don't you have a little bit more compassion for her and stop thinking about how you will be affected, Jamie?
That is none of your business,
replied Jamie. Come on, Bernie, Hastings said as he broke up the argument.
Back to town and leave Marta to us. Where is she being held?
At the clinic on the lower floor of the hospital, volunteered Hastings.
Good. We will discuss her problem with the doctors.
Yeah, Andrews admitted her last night, but Casey is handling everything, said Hastings.
You have been very helpful. We appreciate your coming over here.
Right, said Hastings, glad they were not more upset. He did not want his image in the town to be tarnished. Come on, Bernie, let's go, he said as he took a few steps toward the door. But Weissman was distraught now with the whole scene. He just stood there gawking as they all remained lined up in the kitchen. Bernie, I said, let's get out of here. Weissman bit on his lip and looked down at the floor. He walked right by Hastings, opened the door, and headed for the cruiser. Hastings bade them goodbye. He followed Weissman outside, shutting the door as he walked into the first rays of sunlight. Weissman sat rigidly as he waited for Hastings. Nice morning. I love to watch the sunrise. He started the car and then got back to more immediate matters. And just what the hell is the matter with you, Bernie? Me? What's wrong with them? Did you see them? It's 5 o'clock in the morning. What the hell do you want? They're tired and probably pissed off. Pissed off? Yeah, that's a good one. They got nothing to be pissed off about. And the way they tried to bait me, especially him. Like he really enjoyed getting me mad. Jamie Pendleton never acted that way, and neither did they. They're all good people. Weissman, said Hastings as he backed up, you better check yourself into that clinic. You're doing anything you can now to rationalize Marta's behavior. Inside the farmhouse, Jamie Pendleton slowly made his way to the staircase, followed by the rest of them. They walked in a mesmerized state, evidencing short, deliberate motions.
You know it was a mistake,
said Albert DuPont.
It was unfortunate,
said Jamie as he climbed ahead of them.
You had her cornered,
said Ben.
I should have killed her when I had the chance,
Jamie replied.
She must live to die,
said Mrs. DuPont.
She will, said Jamie. Tonight, when the time is right, at the plant, Marta will die, a painful and prolonged death. She will live to die.
Weissman fought to keep his eyelids open as Hastings brought the cruiser up the Church Hill Road. The DuPont station wagon was parked in a diagonal position across the road. There was nothing wrong with the station wagon. It was pristine, like it had just been through the car wash. And the windshield, which Marta had seen smashed by a severed arm, was in perfect condition. Well, there's the final catch, Bernie. Nothing wrong with the car, is there? Said Hastings as he pulled alongside of it. Where's the broken glass and the blood? Just a little speck of it. Let me see it. By this time, Weissman was tired of listening to Hastings. He just wanted to sleep and didn't even bother responding to the insinuations. Going down to get the kids after I get a few hours sleep, he told Hastings and squinted several times. You what? You have no authority to get those kids. Well, I most certainly do. Marta told me last night. She wants the kids to stay over my apartment because she didn't trust Jamie. She's a nut. It's incompetent. What do you think Jamie is going to say when he finds out you yanked his kids to your apartment? I'll just have to deal with that problem, won't I, Dan? Okay. But I've heard nothing. I'm staying clear of this deal. If you want to take the guy's kids, then you'll have to deal with him. I don't want anything to do about this whole thing. Good, said Weissman as he opened the car door and slammed it. The cold air tingled his face, waking him a bit as he headed inside to get some rest. He felt as confused as Marta herself. She had told this incredible story of murder to Dr. Andrews. She had come screaming into the apartment as if it had really happened, yet he was unnerved by Jamie's apparent disgruntled demeanor, and the rest of them out there walking and talking as if they were under some great restraint from a far superior force, a force he could not identify, a force he was unsure he wanted to match wits against, if it existed at all. Several hours of sleep could help him decide that question. Back at the clinic, the morning staff was just coming on duty. Marta lay sleeping in a room down the hallway from the nurse's station, but the children were already awake, getting dressed in an adjacent room. They were told to do so by the man who stood in the tiny lobby to the rear of the nurse's station. James Pendleton I had somehow learned that his up-to-now unseen grandchildren were at the clinic. He stood stoically, his face filled with the same deadly seriousness as Jamie and the DuPonts. "Mr. Pendleton," said the nurse as she came in from the other room. "Children will be ready shortly. They're almost dressed. We'll bring them out."
I cannot wait all day. I want those children brought out right now.
"Yes, sir. They will be brought out right now," she said as she ran back. Like everyone in town, she feared the Pendletons, and his disposition only added to that fear. Within seconds, the children, their sneakers not yet tied, walked into the lobby. They were still sleepy-eyed. They recognized the man in front of them as the same man in Jamie's photo albums. Pendleton came over to them and grasped their hands tightly. His hands were freezing cold as he looked down at them.
I am your paternal grandfather, children.
"Where's Mommy?" asked the little girl as she became frightened of the crusty old man and his frozen grip. "Uncle Bernie, where's Uncle Bernie?" asked Mitchie.
Never mind them.
Yelled Pendleton as he pulled them away.
You are coming with me, and that is final.
The nurse was aghast at the old man's brutal behavior, and she stomped back to the station. An older nurse was going through reports as Pendleton brought the children down the corridor leading to the first floor stairs. "I just can't believe old man Pendleton's attitude. He absolutely has no consideration for those kids. Just because his name is Pendleton, he can blow up right in here and take whatever he wants." "Well, Dr. Casey said to let him take the children," said the older nurse. "Or you could take your complaint to the board of trustees at the hospital. But you know who chairs the board." Maya the Face, Chapter 12. Why did you give no hint that night? That quickly, as if indifferent quite, you would close your term here, up and be gone, when I could not follow, with the wing of the swallow, to gain one glimpse of you anon. The Going, Thomas Hardy. The fire blazed brightly in the dining room in St. Argus's finest restaurant, the Northern Point, and the waiters scurried about the room with steaming dishes of eggs and bacon. Hastings and Weissman sat at a small table next to the windows overlooking the rockery. Weissman had made the first move in calling the chief in order to apologize for yelling at him, and Hastings suggested they have breakfast. They had much to talk about over pancakes. The subject was the same as the topic of conversation in every house of St. Argus, Marta Pendleton and her disappearing husband. "Well then, Bernie, you tell me in the most elegant way you can just how Marta has seen so many violent things. No one else has seen any of it, and there isn't a shred of evidence to corroborate her stories." I know, Dan," said Weissman. He knew that arguing to the contrary would be fruitless. "But you can't just say she's crazy." What? Rumbled Hastings as he almost choked on a sliver of bacon. He washed it down with some coffee and then pointed his finger at Weissman. Bernie, damn it, at least admit what you feel, will you? All right, I do have feelings for her, okay? He said loudly and leaned over to whisper the rest. Maybe I even still love her, okay? I'll admit that. But you haven't even given her a chance. A chance? Erupted Hastings. Forget it. She had her chance last night when I got suckered into going out to McAllister's place. There's old DuPont on the phone telling me how Marta said there was a fire out there, windows broken, the door knocked off its hinges. I said to myself, Danny, this is another one of those flashes or whatever she calls it. I went out to McAllister's house and I looked over every square inch of it. Still standing. Quite a miracle, huh? And I know I got the Reverend all pissed off. What could I tell him? And you want me to give her a chance? Forget last night, insisted Weissman. Suppose she really saw Jamie's death. You said it yourself. There's no evidence. It's been over 36 hours. Where the hell is he, Dan? Well, who would want him dead? Asked Hastings. He downed the rest of the coffee and called the waiter over for a refill. I mean, this guy's a chemist, a researcher. Who cares what he's doing? Well, that's the most ignorant stance I've ever heard, confessed Weissman. That's just the point. We don't know why. We should figure this out. Tell me, said Hastings as he gnawed at the pancakes. Who were his enemies? What about his father? I'd start right there. Oh, come on, Weissman. Don't ever ask to become a deputy or help me out. Old man Pendleton has better things to do than to murder his son. Well, I just want you to know, what Pendleton killed his son, that's crazy in itself, laughed Hastings. If you had just let me finish. What's Pendleton said about this whole thing? I would find those comments very interesting. He called. Once news got around the town, he was quite upset until I straightened him out. Oh, I bet you did. You told him everything was all right and how Marta was seeing things. Right. I told him I would investigate this matter and for him not to worry. Did he offer any kind of reward or anything like that? Look, they've always hated each other ever since college. I can remember their constant feuding. Goes back farther than that. I remember him shouting at the old man right here in this restaurant. He was only 3 years old at the time. The old man was always pressuring him. You don't pressure kids. Not if you want him to stick around. And look what happened to Jamie. Yeah, look what happened to Jamie. Will you cut that out? Hastings asked as the waiter came over to the table with a pot of coffee. You wanted coffee, Chief? Yeah, fill it, please. Mr. Weissman? No more for me, thanks. The waiter filled the cup and left. Hastings bent over the table and spoke to Weissman directly. If you want the best opinion. If I wanted the best opinion, I wouldn't be here, smiled Weissman. Funny boy. You listen to me, Bernie. Get that friend of yours to the clinic at the hospital. That's what DuPont wants anyway. Get Dr. Casey to talk to her. Find out what the real cause of her problems are. And don't go around apologizing for her anymore. If you really want to help her, then get her help. I don't see how that would be the best move at this time, said Weissman. She doesn't need both extremes right now. As Weissman spoke, the dining room became filled with chatter. People gasped as they arose from the table, some backing against the walls. Weissman, in the middle of his sentence, turned around toward the doorway, and his mouth froze. Jamie Pendleton, unscarred, his face smooth and compact, stood in the doorway. He wore his white turtleneck and chinos, both without the slightest trace of blood. His eyes were focused intently at Weissman. It was like the ghost had returned from the dead, and his forward manner made it appear that he knew of Weissman's infatuation with his wife. Weissman, as he looked into Jamie's eyes, his credence in Marta's stories flip-flopped several times because he now knew that Jamie Pendleton was alive. Hastings threw down his napkin and ran across the room to Jamie. The flabbergasted Weissman stayed behind at the table, asking himself how this man could be standing there. Jamie, where have you been? Shouted Hastings. Do you have any idea what you've done to this town? Jamie still stood there, serious as a cast-iron mold, and never once evidenced an expression on his face. His eyes were still trained on Weissman, and as he spoke, his voice seemed changed. It was as if he had caught a very slight cold or had an infection in his throat. On further inspection, his voice even sounded primitive, low in tone, and very threatening.
That was not my fault. That the town is in an uproar. More of the imagination of the people.
In this town, he said, still looking toward Weissman. Weissman became terrified because he was convinced Jamie was out to get him. In his thick, slow-speaking voice, Jamie called across the room to Weissman.
How is my wife, Bernie? I understand she has more problems.
Weissman was sure that Jamie was reading his mind. Your wife, oh, Marta, he said as he stood, trying to act casual as he crossed the dining room. Marta, oh, she's feeling a little tired today, said Weissman as he thought to himself. Yeah, she was out late, very late, Jamie.
That is interesting. How late last night was she?
Asked Jamie as if he had really read Weissman's mind. How'd you know that? Weissman wanted to know. It's all over town, you damn fool, chided Hastings as he shook his head. Jamie, where have you been?
I had some personal business to take care of in Concord, the University School of Chemistry. I have been there for the past few hours. We're doing research all along the same lines. I wanted to compare notes.
And where the hell is your car? Badgered Weissman.
If it is any of your business, I turned it into the agency where I got it. It is time we talked about my wife.
Well, Bernie's an expert in that area, volunteered Hastings. He's taken care of Marta most of the time you were gone.
No, he has. And just what does your timely association with my wife tell you, Mr. Weissman?
She's very sick, Jamie. I'd second that. Probably sick enough to be put away. She's seeing the most bizarre...
I understand.
Weissman was astounded and unnerved by the fact that Jamie would turn on Marta right now. Weissman would have no say in what Marta's fate would be. Guilt washed over him like the river against the banks. Why should he be deciding things for Marta anyways? Was that not the right of her husband? But Jamie's arrogance was getting him upset, and he knew he must proceed in a logical manner. Hey, look, I would think you think she should have a second chance, said Jamie. Yeah, that's right. He was convinced that Jamie could sense what was going on inside his head, and he had problems with the fact that Jamie was actually still alive and Marta was crazy. Because of his intense feelings for Marta, he had bent his thoughts and perceptions to convince himself that her husband, now his rival, was dead.
My wife needs relaxation. I will go out and try to calm her nerves,
he said, almost in a monotone. Oh, well, I can take you in the cruiser. I insist on giving you a ride there myself, said Hastings. He put his arm around Jamie and they walked toward the lobby, away from Weissman. You know, your father was very concerned about you, as they headed for the door.
That is very reassuring. I would enjoy a visit from my father,
said the younger Pendleton. When had Jamie Pendleton ever wanted to meet with his father? Why was he acting like an insensitive drone? Jamie Pendleton was not an overly jovial person, nor was he the dull, introspective man who had just appeared in the restaurant. He was never that serious, never that mean. Weissman watched them pass the outer windows and then turned to leave, but he fell forward, stumbling over the chair, a chair that he was convinced had not been there. He was sure of it. The chair had been under the table. He could have sworn it had moved in his path, but that would be impossible. That would be crazy. When Hastings returned from the farmhouse, he had one thing on his mind. His first official call concerning Jamie's return would be to Pendleton himself. If the old man heard it from another source, the chief would look bad. And above all, Hastings was very concerned about his own image. He sat at the side of his desk and waited for someone to pick up the telephone at the mansion.
Pendleton residence?
Answered one of the servants. Yes, this is Chief Hastings. Would you please put Mr. Pendleton on the line?
I'm sorry, Mr. Hastings, but Mr. Pendleton is not at home at the present time.
I have great news. His son has returned back to town, beamed Hastings as if he had personally brought Jamie back to St. Argus.
Really? Well, I'm sure Mr. Pendleton will be greatly relieved. He seemed quite concerned over this entire matter. 1 minute, please,
said the servant as Hastings waited.
Mr. Hastings?
Yes.
I've just been advised that Mr. Pendleton is out at the power plant. He was there a good portion of the night.
Oh, good, good. I'll call him right now. Thank you very much, and you have a nice day, he said, tapping the hook and getting on an open line. He flipped through the telephone book and got the number to the plant. The line rang for the longest time before he finally got an answer.
Hello?
This is Chief Hastings. Who is this?
This is Mr. Minos.
Good, good. Minos, good news, good news. Jamie's returned. Isn't that great?
No, that is good news.
Yeah, well, put Pendleton on the line, will you? The telephone dropped to the floor, clanging into Hastings' ear. He held the receiver out until Pendleton came on the line.
Yes, Chief. And I feel assistance to you.
He asked in the same tone as Minos. Well, I found your son. He came back this morning.
I'm aware of that. He came to visit me at the plant. Had a nice chat with him.
Then you two have made up. Good, good,
We have reached an understanding.
he said slowly. Ah, yeah, it sounds like you're not feeling well, though, Mr. Pendleton.
I am fine. Thank you for the information.
He had hoped to be showered with praise for calling the old man. Instead, he listened to an unemotional monotone with no substance. As he set the telephone back on the desk, he shook his head and asked himself what anyone could do to please the old man. Upon seeing Jamie enter the DuPont kitchen, Marta's bridge on sanity collapsed into the churning waters of her own thoughts below. Between the ear-shattering screams and incoherent wails, her mind wanted to self-destruct. Before they could get to her, she had run up the stairs and locked herself in her mother's bedroom. As if being attacked by invading armies, she barricaded the door with the highboy and all the chairs in the room, finally dragging over the large canopy bed, and she tried to convince herself of what she had seen the other night. No, no, I saw him dead. He was dead. Dead. He is dead. The stark realities of her life now faced her head on. She could really be insane. But her mind was not radically different. It felt normal. There was no feeling of insanity if insanity had a distinct flavor like a bad apple. If she was insane, she could see these flashes temporarily, or maybe she would soon fall into a state of total fantasy. Then the thought crossed her mind. Maybe she had really wanted to see Jamie dead. Maybe she was so disgusted with life that she would want him dead. That was a tough realization to swallow, and it remained floating around her brain with her other confusing thoughts. DuPont and her brother Ben tried to open the door. The lock itself was secure enough to keep them out of the room. So they tried reasoning with her, telling her how much they cared and how they would try to help her if she just opened the door. Her mother arrived next, followed by Jamie himself. When her mother's attempts to bring Marta out failed, the once assumed dead man spoke to his wife.
I have come to get you out, Marta.
Well, I'm not coming out. Never, she yelled at him and then thought, why are you talking like that?
Marta, you know we can solve our problems in a logical manner, like adults.
Why do you want me to come out? That's what Johnson really wanted, isn't it? Put Marta away so she doesn't bother anybody anymore, so she can have her flashes with the rest of the lunatics. Well, you can't do it.
Johnson never wanted that.
Why are you talking like that, Jamie? What's wrong with you?
You only think I'm talking this way. It's because you are upset. You come out and we'll talk. We don't have to go right to the clinic. I promise. We will spend time together. just like I promised. You can relax.
You don't care about me. You never have. It's all been about you. The great Jamie Pendleton. You.
If you feel that way, we can discuss it.
Marta sat on the bed and tried to reason the whole thing out. Her only salvation would be cooperation with them. Even if she believed what she had seen was reality, she had to cast it aside and let them call the shots. Let them designate what was real, or she wouldn't survive. They would put her away if she persisted in her arguments. But it was still possible that she had seen reality. Maybe that was the flavor of insanity she was looking for. The insane never believe they're insane until they have lost their grip and destroyed themselves. And Marta did not want to be destroyed, even if it meant admitting she was insane. She wanted to live. In Johnson's office, she had talked about death, how she wanted to die, but now she wanted life more than anything. She wanted to do things she had never done before, find new ways and experiences. And in order to do that, she would have to take the first step, their first step. Marta, can you hear me?
What are you doing here?
She heard her husband yell. I came to see if I could help.
I don't need any help from you, my friend.
Bernie, is that you? Are you really out there? She asked, remembering his gentle understanding of the past 2 nights. Weissman could get her out of this awful dilemma. I want to see Bernie first or I won't come out.
Very well,
said Jamie resentfully.
Go right ahead, my friend.
I'm coming, Marta. It's all right. Marta looked over the fort she had erected. Weissman promised her safety and she believed him. She got up and began moving the furniture away from the door. Putting her hand on the deadbolt, she turned it ever so slowly. The door opened instantly, but it was not Weissman who burst inside.
Thought you could get away with it,
asked Jamie as he confronted her.
Wouldn't let me in, but you'd let your boyfriend in.
Jamie's whole body seemed agitated, prone to short, jerky movements. All the time she had known Jamie, she had never noticed these idiosyncrasies. Boyfriend, she cried for the first time when she saw her husband's implacable face close up.
You have a lot to learn, Marta,
he said as he violently pushed her against the wall. And just for a passing moment in his rising anger, she seemed to see something in his eyes, just like she had in the upstairs bedroom. It was a thin red circle around the iris, paper thin, and it vanished almost at the moment it appeared. In their volatile state, she could not be sure if she had seen it at all. Hey, don't treat her like that, yelled Weissman. Leave her alone. She's been through a lot. Jamie turned from his wife and set his eyes on Weissman.
Don't you ever tell me what to do,
he said, still keeping Marta pinned in. But he was not through. He reached out and grabbed Weissman. His fingers were cold as ice from the outside, and he lifted him high into the air. Amidst Marta's screams, he hurled Weissman across the waxed wooden floor. Weissman slid into a mass of furniture, stunned by the impact, but even more shocked by the fact that Jamie had the strength to accomplish such a feat. I'm not going to stand by here, said the smaller Weissman as he got to his feet, and watch you hurt her. Jamie had overstepped his bounds, and he seemed to know it.
The children want to go skating,
he said, changing the subject in the most calming way.
Calm down when you are ready, Marta,
he said abruptly as he left the room as quickly as he had come in. Marta raced over to Weissman and threw her arms around him as the others watched from the second-floor landing. Weissman once again stroked her hair to reassure Marta he would stand by her. Oh, Bernie, I'm so scared. I don't know what's real and what isn't. What am I seeing now? Is this real or is it fantasy? I have no way of knowing. Come on, Marta, it's all right. Get a hold of yourself. You can do it, he said as he lifted her head up and looked into her moist, bloodshot eyes. I know you can do it, and I'm right here with you. But I saw 3 separate things. They're not real, were they? The dead Jamie, the bundles, the ghost, and the seance. It's all in my mind, wasn't it? It could only be temporary, Marta. You'll be all right. I'll help you if we have to go over to that clinic together. But I'm with you. Please remember that. The same old feelings were bubbling up in Weissman's heart. He was overtly jealous of Jamie now. Feelings for Marta, which had long been buried, were even stronger than ever. What he had once thought so wrong now seemed indisputably right. My Other Face, Chapter 13. What do you think he would say if someone told him that what he had formerly seen was a meaningless illusion, but now, being somewhat nearer to reality and turned toward more real objects, he was getting a truer view? The allegory of the cave, the Republic, Plato. Mitchell and Sandra jumped into the DuPont station wagon with their skating equipment. Jamie was rather reticent about the whole skating affair. It was as if he were merely going through the motions. His mind seemed preoccupied with other matters, things he was pondering deeply, things that had to be done at a later date, and things that he had to restrain himself from carrying out. Marta was on the far side of the passenger seat, extremely tense and fearful of what the town was saying about her. But she had to face it, admit it, and take it from there. You've got to be strong, Marta. Like Weissman says, you can be worked out. And besides, it only happened 3 times. This must be temporary. After all, I'm not totally out of control. I will control it. I will control this fear of being insane and being judged insane. Just don't let them see that they're getting to you. Then you'll be all right. You'll get out of the sanitarium. Just stay calm. Admit what's happened and stand firm. You're going to get better, kid. For sure this time. Mommy, I'm still hungry, said Sandy as she leaned forward into the front seat. Jamie was backing the car into the road.
If you had eaten the damned food, you would not be so...
snapped Jamie, somehow trying to control his rage. Marta stared at him in disbelief. He was not one to talk to the children like that. He always played with them. He was their knight in shining armor. What your father means, Sandy, is that you should have eaten more at the same time we all ate, honey, she said, covering up for her husband's insensitivity.
No, that is not what I mean at all. She should have done what she was told. No questions.
He yelled back at her, his head moving in short, jerky motions. Well, I guess you know it all then, don't you, Jamie? Said Marta on the verge of tears. Daddy, said Mitchie, as Jamie spun the tires in the snow and brought the car down the road. Can we play hockey like we did at the rink back home?
I don't feel like playing hockey,
frowned Jamie as he looked ahead. But Daddy, we always play hockey. Come on, please, pleaded the boy.
I said no,
screamed Jamie as he turned and bared his teeth at the boy. He had just snapped and pushed the gas pedal downward. The car was gaining speed down the narrow, poorly paved road, and he was scaring Marta out of her wits as he approached 60 miles an hour. Already drained from the previous day's experiences, Marta was pushed back against the seat as the speedometer neared 80 miles an hour. Slow this car down right now, she demanded, but he kept the pressure on, accelerating even faster. Soon they passed the farm fields, barreling over the road bumps at nearly 100 miles an hour. Jamie gripped the wheel with all his strength as an oncoming pickup truck swerved off the road and into a field. They had just narrowly escaped being killed. Fortunately, they were approaching the river road, and he recanted, taking his foot off the gas. He pumped the brakes several times and then slowly reached a normal speed by the time they reached the intersection. His eyes looked delirious with an inner contentment. He had just brought them to death's door and had enjoyed every second of it. Do it again, Daddy, shouted the children, who thought it was all a game. But Marta knew better, and she knew her husband. Just what the hell are you trying to prove, Jamie? Just tell me why you risked all our lives back there. Just tell me.
You are imagining things again, Marta,
he said with a cunning smile that contorted his lips upward like a melted piece of plastic. He ran the stop sign at the corner, almost hitting a car as it neared the intersection, and the man laid on the horn. producing a Doppler effect in the distance. But Jamie was still impressed with his own ability to risk their lives. Although he proceeded at a normal speed to the skating rink, Marta awaited a change of mood at any second. She knew not what he was thinking, nor did she know what he was capable of doing. The skating rink was about a mile from the intersection and only a half-mile north of McAllister's house. Jamie parked in back of dozens of cars on both sides of the road. Marta looked out at the rink. She had passed it the night before when she had run from McAllister's house. The red house was visible in the distance. It was the place where she had nearly lost her mind, and she felt as if she were letting the whole scene slip away too quickly. She felt compelled to somehow acknowledge the awful things that had taken place there, but she couldn't, not if she wanted them to start questioning her again. The children opened the car doors, and Marta hesitated. She was not altogether comfortable about taking her children out of here with a man who utterly petrified her. She put on her red stocking cap and opened the door. The cold air tingled her face as she stepped out of the car. There was no stopping now. She had to go forward. The rink, which the town flooded directly from the river, was filled with a mass of people all bundled up to protect themselves from the cold. Several dogs trotted across the ice, maintaining their balance amidst the freestyle skaters, and there were hockey games at both ends. As the children walked ahead with their father, Marta took the time to watch a massive flock of starlings as they swarmed down for food on the small island near the railroad tracks above the opposite side of the rink, and she felt at home near the bonfire that somebody had built in order to keep warm. For a moment, she was almost glad she had returned to St. Argus, but Jamie called the children again as they sat on the rink's edge. It was as if he were deliberately trying to lure them away from their mother.
Over here, children. Hurry.
What in God's name is he doing now? Making things worse for me, not better. He wants to put me away, and he's going to torment me until he does it. I can't let him do that. He will not get the best of me. I want to live. She ran ahead carrying her skates, but the kids had already started lacing up their own skates. Marta plopped herself down beside them, kicking off her shoes, and tried to put on her skates. Jamie stood out on the ice. She was having trouble lacing her own skates. It was like a force that was not allowing her to put the laces through the loops. The children, having finished, skated onto the ice, and she got frustrated. "Aren't you even going to skate?" she asked Jamie as he stood on the ice in his shoes. But he didn't answer. She fought to tie her skates as the children reached him and skated toward the center of the rink. She finally laced her skates and stood. She began skating across the ice, but skated as if it were her first time in the ice. Her balance was precarious at best, and she tried to catch up with the children who were now 50 yards away. But she kept falling, and people were asking her if this was her first time skating on the ice. Her eyes filled with tears as her husband led the children across the rink. He might be responsible for her sloppiness on the ice, but she couldn't think like that. Those thoughts had to be diminished. That would be outlandish, not what the world deemed true, and if she tried to stand up against the world, they would throw her away in the sanitarium. Jamie was motionless now, like a mannequin in a store window, as the children played on the ice in front of him. Marta was able to cross the ice now as the pressure eased, and she moved at a very slow pace. Even though he had his back to her, he could sense her approach. He shouted something to the children and then pointed to the area in back of the island under the railroad embankment. She tried to hurry, only falling down again as they disappeared behind the tree-filled island. Having left him alone with them was very disquieting to her, and she inched her way to the island. The children, strangely enough, were alone and racing with each other in the back area. She skated over to them as they laughed and slipped harmlessly on the ice, but where was Jamie? "Are you children all right?" she asked, afraid he might have done something to them. "What, Mummy?" asked Mitchie as he slid across the ice. "Where is your father?" "Daddy said he'd be right back," said Sandy as she laughed at Mitchie when he fell. "You can't even stand up." "What?" shouted Marta as she thought the child was talking about her. "Mitchie, Mummy, he can't even stand up." She laughed and pointed at her brother. "Oh yeah, you can't even belly flop on the ice." "Can too," she said as she skated up behind him. Marta looked all around the area and questioned the fact that Jamie had left them alone. She searched the railroad embankment and all the way to the far side of the rink. And then the island. Maybe he was on the island. It was just too thick with trees and bushes to tell. At that moment she heard a deep cracking noise, like a crack from a towering tree that had just been felled in the forest. She turned and saw an enormous fissure in the ice. It was almost zero. Cracks were impossible. At first she was not frightened, but as the ice around her began to give way, she panicked. Other cracks were forming like the stress on a mirror, which yielded under the pressure of a heavier force. In desperation, she tried to skate away, but again she could not hold her balance, and the children kept playing at the far end of the island, not noticing what was happening to their mother just yards away. Marta screamed as she was encircled by the cracks. The children looked over to their mother as the ice was tilted upward. The chilling water gushed along its edges, and Marta's heart almost stopped from the shock. "Mommy! Mommy!" they called as they edged their way toward the breakage. Marta could feel her body sliding toward the open water. Without thinking, she rolled to her right, still sliding down. As she was about to hit the freezing water, she sprung toward the side ice, and it began to crack. She scrambled on all fours, yelling for the children to get back as she made it to the smooth portion of the ice. "Mommy!" they yelled as they huddled up to her, very much aware that she had nearly lost her life. "Mommy, it's all right." "Mommy's all right. Mommy's all right. I'm all right," she said as she finally held them. Unbelievably, the chunk of ice that she had leaped from sank downward like a continental plate and moved right under the other ice, leaving an area of open water. "Oh my God," she said as she put her hand to her mouth. "What's the matter, Mommy?" asked Mitchie. "Come on, children, we're going back to the car. I don't think the ice over here is safe. Where's your father?"
Why are you looking for me?
asked Jamie in a low-pitched voice. Marta almost leaped into the air as he stood behind them. "Where were you? Did you see what happened over there?"
You shouldn't skate on the ice, Marta. You ought to know that,
he said, once again evidencing a self-confident grin. "Is the ice all right, Daddy?"
The ice is all right.
"But Mommy said..."
Your mother is imagining things again.
"Look for yourself, Jamie," she said, pointing to the open water. "The damned ice is cracking apart."
I think it is safe here,
he told them. "Good, Daddy, let's play hockey. Come on, you like to play hockey," said Mitchie as he gave his father a body check, more like a love tap, but Jamie seemed in no mood for horseplay. His face became vicious like when he played monster. "It's the monster, Mitchie," said his sister.
Shut up,
yelled Jamie.
I'm not playing any games.
"Okay, monster," laughed the boy as he checked his father once again. Jamie seemed to become unglued. He lifted up the smalling, unsuspected boy into the air by the hood of his parka. The boy's eyes bulged and his face turned red as he was being choked at the collar.
I told you, no damned hockey.
He said.
I said it then and I'm saying it now.
He yelled as Marta rushed over. His eyes became red around the irises as he lifted the boy backward, and with a single thrust he hurled him high into the air. The boy tumbled over and over again, hitting the ice with a thud, sliding toward the railroad embankment. The boy was able to sit up, but he was crying uncontrollably. "You son of a bitch!" yelled Marta as she swung at Jamie, but he blocked every blow and smiled contentedly. "You bully! You bully!" she continued, taking her daughter in her arms as she hurried over to Mitchie. She picked up the bloody boy in her arms. "I just wanted to play. He choked me. He choked me." "It's all right, Mitchie. It's all right. Daddy was upset. He didn't mean it. He didn't mean it," she kept telling him. She knew, however, that Daddy did mean it, and that something was dreadfully wrong with Daddy. She took the tissues from her pocket and wiped the boy's bloody forehead and nose. "Keep your head back, Mitchie," she told him. As she applied the tissues, she turned and saw Jamie disappear around the far side of the island. She looked back to her son and cleaned the blood out of his tiny nose. Mitchie winced as she wiped the blood off his forehead. "What's the matter with Daddy?" asked Sandy. "Daddy was upset. He's sorry. He didn't mean it," she repeated her official line. "Everything will be all right now. We're going back to the other side. He won't hurt me again, will he? Asked the frightened boy as she cleaned the last traces of blood away. No, he won't hurt you again. Won't hurt him again. That's a good one, Marta. He's the one that's crazy, not me. He'd do it again. But who do I tell about this? Who would listen to me about anything now? Who? Weissman. Bernie. Yes, Bernardo. I have to get Bernardo down here. Mommy, can we go now? Asked Mitchie. Yes, we're going, as she said as she helped him to his feet. That's the boy. Are you all right? Yes. Yep, I'm all right. Where are we going, Mommy? Asked Sandy, grabbing her mother's hand. Back to Grandma and Grandpa's house? Asked Mitchie. No, we're going to try and get over to Uncle Bernie's place. She led them across the ice, turning briefly to the freezing gray water in the distance. The cracking of the ice had been Jamie's doing. She was sure of it. That had to be forgotten for the time being. Getting to the phone was the first priority, and she could see the public telephones up the road embankment and back of the bonfire. To her consternation, she saw the station wagon pulling away from the rink. Once again, it was traveling at an unusually rapid speed. In another sense, she was relieved because now Jamie was gone. And she was again baffled. In the past, he had never so much as laid a hand on either of the children, never spanking them and barely even reprimanding them. He had always left the discipline to her. After all, he was the knight in shining armor. Marta walked up the embankment with her skates on. The children took off their skates as she called Weissman's apartment. She was cognizant now of how Weissman viewed her sanity. The facts she had related to him about her flashes were now in total disarray. But she did remember that Weissman was also the brunt of an attack by Jamie earlier this morning. Above all, she knew he cared. Weissman was at that very moment holding a glass of bourbon in front of his eyes. The return of Jamie Pendleton had provided him with yet another excuse to soothe his wounded mind. He swished the liquid around and debated whether to take the drink. It was only the ringing of the telephone that led him to consume the liquor in a single gulp. He wiped his lips and rushed to the front to answer the telephone.
Hello?
Bernie, you've got to come out here right now. You have to.
Where are you, Marta?
I'm at the skating rink. You have to come out here now, she pleaded.
Why? What's the matter? You sound like...
Bernie, it's Jamie. He almost killed Mitchie, and he left us out here.
He what?
Cried Weissman. He choked my son. He choked him, she said very quickly, and then threw him across the ice.
Jamie did that?
Yes. Just come down here, please, she yelled. I saw the same red circle around his eyes.
Sure. I'm leaving right now, Marta. I'll be there in 5 minutes.
He said as he hung up. Weissman knew that she needed him out there, and her husband had maliciously left her again. Now he had done more damage. Weissman grabbed his coat and sprinted down the stairs to his car. Less than 5 minutes later, he was nearing the skating rink and saw them all waiting in front of the telephone. Is he still out here? Asked Weissman as he got out of the car. He was not entirely satisfied with her judgment, though. When he saw the cut on the boy's head, he became angered. No, I told you, Bernie, he's long gone now, she said as she turned to the children. Sandy and Mitchie, get in Uncle Bernie's car. We'll be right in. Once they were inside the car, Weissman held her arms and looked into her brown eyes as he questioned her. You're telling me that Jamie tried to choke his own son and then, well, I could see from the scratches on the boy's forehead. What do you think, Bernie? You think I'm making this up too? She asked. Didn't you see the inner fury inside him this morning when he threw you across the room? What about that red circle? What I saw in the upper bedroom. I saw it again this morning, but I didn't want to admit it. I saw it again this afternoon. But that's impossible, began Weissman. I don't know. Are you saying he's possessed with something? I think that stuff is all kind of crazy. I don't know what the hell's going on here or why he drove down the road there at 100 miles an hour. Ask the kids. There's something inside of that man, something making him do all these things. I know. He's not acting like the Jamie Pendleton I knew. This morning at the Northern Point. Oh, never mind. I don't want to start speculating. No, tell me. When he left the restaurant this morning with Hastings, I was about to leave and I could swear I saw a chair move and block my path. I could have been imagining it because I was so upset. Yes, yes. She thought about the ice cracks. I wasn't going to mention this because if I don't act normal, they'll put me away. You don't want to mention what? The ice, she said as she pointed to the far side of the wooded island. Jamie left us before he threw Mitchie. I was alone in the middle of the ice. It started cracking all around me. Nowhere else but around me. In this weather? Are you kidding me? There must be a foot of ice under there. See? It cracked. And the slab I was on was moved upward by some kind of force, and I fell toward the water. I just rolled off just in time, and he made me fall down continuously. I want to see that ice, he told her. Go ahead. You stay in the car with them, and I'll tell you another thing that's been bothering me. Where the hell was Jamie all this time? Was he really where he said he was? I think he's full of it. Maybe he is. I just want to be out of here, Bernie, out of St. Argus, she said loudly. I know now that my feelings about this place were 100% correct. I don't know how they were, but they were, and I know what I've seen here, Bernie. It's all true. I'm sure of it. And I'll never admit that to anyone but you. He nodded his head as if to pacify her. I'll be right back. Just stay in the car and lock it right now, he said as he ran along the embankment and over to the ice. He crossed the path on the islands and moved through the thickets and over the tiny inlets. When he arrived on the far side of the island, he could see the cracks and the open water. At least Marta didn't imagine that, he thought, as he looked outward. Almost at that very moment, the ice around the open water started to crack apart in tiny pieces. He was mystified at the seemingly impossible, but he knew he must talk to the man in charge of the rink. As he turned across the island again, he could see tiny pockets of ice on the island were shattering like glass. He hurried along the path as the wind picked up, gusting strongly and breaking the brittle little tree branches into the ground. It was almost as if they were destined for him. Was he starting to see and hear things like Marta? On the other side of the island, toward the street, everything was calm. Weissman shuffled his way across the ice and found the man in charge. The guy couldn't believe him and laughed. Weissman finally talked him into checking out the far side of the island. Then he returned to the car. Weissman got inside, and Marta looked up with tearful eyes. Well? Yeah, I saw it, he said as he started the car. I think we should go right back to the apartment. Thank you, Bernie, thank you, she said as she held onto his wrist. I don't know what I'd do without you here. She let go of his wrist, but held his hand once he finished shifting the car. For the first time in 10 years, she felt secure. He gave her that security because he cared deeply about her. Jamie only cared about himself. With Weissman, she could sense the same feeling she had for Jamie years ago, before all the changes. A simple and unabashed feeling of comfort. More than ever, she wanted to leave St. Argus, and the idea of Weissman taking her away was becoming more and more attractive. But she was afraid to ask him. He might not really feel the same way. They sat around Weissman's blazing fire. It was past 11 o'clock in the evening, and Marta had plenty of time to calm down. She had just finished talking on the telephone and set it down as she turned to Weissman. My mother said he hasn't come back. The car is right in the driveway, but Jamie's not around. Strange, I would say, very strange. It sounded like she was coming over here. She is, but she'll bring me back. I'll get the suitcases and come back. I don't want to be anywhere near Jamie. Well, the children can sleep in the bedroom with you, of course, and I can sleep out here on the sofa. Good, good. I feel so much safer here. I can't say I know what's wrong with Jamie, but I've decided something. Yeah, what's that? Tomorrow, I'm going over to the clinic. If I really am crazy, I'll take the necessary steps to correct what's wrong with me. I'm determined to straighten myself out, Bernie. I can't stand this not knowing, and I've been taking it on the chin too long. I know you have, he said as he sat down beside her and held her hand. He squeezed it gently, and she returned the gesture. I'll be right here. I won't leave. Don't worry, she said as she picked up her coat. The children who had been playing in the bedroom came running into the front room. They were giggling and unaware of the cataclysmic events going on around them. Can we watch TV now, Mommy? Asked Sandy. I should say not. You two have stayed up way past your bedtime. But, Mom, insisted her son. No buts, it's bedtime. Come on, let's get in the bedroom, she said as she nudged them ahead, and they reluctantly followed her instructions as they always did. Weissman's heart pounded like a colossal bass drum. He was beginning to have an inkling that she might feel the same way about him. His loneliness would be over. He might be able to have her after all these years. It was exhilarating. A victory of sorts. A victory he was unprepared for, and a victory that was not yet his. A few minutes later, Mrs. DuPont pulled up to the apartment. The children were already tucked in bed, and Marta arose when she saw the station wagon lights. Understandably, she couldn't help but remember what she had seen 2 nights before. She hugged Weissman tightly, and he brought her down to the door, where she hugged him again. In an instant, she was gone down the stairs. He went back to the front room and saw her get inside the station wagon. Once again, Bernie Weissman was alone. My Other Face, Chapter 14. Someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply. Theirs not to reason why. Theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Charge of the Light Brigade, Alfred Lord Tennyson. Marta had hardly spent any time packing the suitcases. She had been talking with her parents around the kitchen table. Slowly and in vivid detail, she went at great lengths to advise them of the day's events. Once again, however, she had very little credibility. In fact, they were downright hostile. Once again, to them, she had very little credibility. In fact, they were downright hostile. "Well, what do you expect us to think?" grilled DuPont. "You've been imagining, those flashes of yours." "I'll try to remain as calm as I can," began Marta. She was determined to keep a lid on her sanity. "We went out to the rink. Jamie, as I told you, has not been acting right." "He was a little distant this morning," said Harriet. "A little distant? What about the ring in his eyes? The red ring from the bundles? What the hell was that?" "But I can't tell him about that. No, definitely not. Just stick to the story, Marta. They have to listen. I know what happened. I'm sure of it." "Yes, he was distant, I'll give you that," said DuPont. "I'll tell you, he's been that way ever since we came back here. Anyway, he was yelling at the kids in the car. He drove the crosstown road at over 100 miles an hour. "Nobody could drive that fast on that road," insisted DuPont, once again doubting her. "Well, he did, okay? I was there, and so were the kids. We went to the rink, and he took off with the kids. They went to the back of the island. I went around to find him and almost fell through the ice. When I got back, Jamie was there. He snuck up on us." "Oh, he was just fooling around. You know how Jamie likes to play with the kids." "You call lifting my son in the air until he turns red playing? Throwing him across the ice? I'll show you the cuts and bruises on Mitchie. His nose was all bloodied, and I can prove it." "Just like you proved Jamie's death? The ghosts upstairs? The seance?" asked DuPont as he hammered away at her. "I'm getting damn sick of all this," said Marta as she got up from the table. At that moment, the power seemed to fade and then come back on. Marta, in the light of everything else, was frightened by the change. "What was that?" "Happens every night at midnight, dear," said her mother. "Must be the generators at the Pendleton plant. In any event, I'm going to get the children's clothes, and then I'm going over to Weissman's apartment. You can come with me if you want and see their bruises. Talk to both the kids if you don't believe me." DuPont was a proud man and didn't want to reveal any weakness, but he knew he had put the pressure on his daughter. "Marta, I didn't mean to come down on you like that," he said as he arose. "We're just trying to help you. We want to get to the truth. We want things to go right for you." "Then start by giving me a little trust. I know what I've seen. As best as I can judge it, it's reality, and that's all I know." "Go over to Bernie Weissman's house if you're really scared, but remember, This all could be inside your head. I know that, and I'll find out when I go to the clinic tomorrow. I want to be hypnotized. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going upstairs to get the children's things, she told them, and she left the kitchen. They could hear her going up the stairs to the third-floor bedroom. You are too harsh, Albert, scolded Harriet. At least have a little compassion for what the girl is going through, will you? I said I was sorry. That will have to do, replied Albert. It was not good enough, Albert. You never should have cross-examined her in the first place. Ah, he ranted as he turned away from her. The door to the kitchen opened, and Ben DuPont, his eyes bloodshot from drinking, stumbled into the kitchen with a wide grin on his face. The booze reeked on his breath. Ah, you're a fine sight, you are, bellowed DuPont. Hello, hello, hello. It's been a fine evening out there, very fine, and I'm fine tonight. And how are you two wonderful people doing tonight? He babbled. I'm going upstairs with Marta, said Harriet. And just where the hell have you been? Marta was packing the smallest suitcases hurriedly, as if one more minute in that house would cause her irreparable harm. Was that Ben downstairs, Mother? She asked as she kept packing. Yes, it was. Ben has been drinking a little bit tonight, she answered, not knowing what to say. At least he's out enjoying himself, she said as she thought about Weissman's problem. I mean, if it's not carried to extremes. I know he had a lot of friends down the VFW. Yes, he does, Marta. Your problems, are they, is it something I did? She asked as Ben marched to the second-floor door, singing loudly. Yes, something I did in your upbringing. Your problems must originate in the past, sometime when you were here with us. It's not that simple, Mother, she said, looking up at her mother for the first time. Ben had reached the landing below and went to the second-floor bathroom, still singing. Marta looked below and smiled, turned back to her mother. Johnson told me it's most likely the present pressures on me. That is, the flashes. But from what I've seen, there haven't been any flashes. He also said it could be a physical thing, Mother. I've had tests, all negative, for some time. When I was in Los Angeles, I was having one flash a day. But Jamie in the car. I don't know, Mother, she said as she began packing once again. The longer I stay in St. August, the more I believe that what I've seen is real, very real. Marta, that's impossible, said her mother as she vigorously shook her head. Is it? Is it, Mother? She asked with a grin as the front door to the house slammed. Marta's face dropped. She jerked her head to the right and could feel the frigid air flowing into the house. Outside, the two dogs owned by the DuPonts began to howl, a low and mournful wail, as they looked directly at the moon. What's going on now? It's your father, dear. He's just checking the doors before we go to bed. Then why is it getting so cold in here? He must have left the door wide open. You continue your packing, Marta. I'll go down and talk to your father. Maybe he did leave the door open again, although that would be a cardinal sin in his book. You know how he... She stopped speaking as she heard noises below. Things seemed to be flying all over the downstairs rooms. Glass was breaking and the walls thundered with the impact of hurled objects. What are you doing? They heard Albert DuPont shout through the 2 floors. Are you crazy? Put that damn thing down. It's Jamie, said Marta with her eyes wide open. Jamie has come back to kill us all. Marta, don't say that. Then what the hell is going on? As she spoke, her father yelled loudly. No! No! Ah! He sounded like a steer being put to slaughter. Both men clutched each other as each successive cry for help rocked the farmhouse with runaway terror. Down the stairs, commanded Marta. Her upper lip protruded. No, we'll be killed, cried her mother, frozen on the spot. Her mind ceased to have the capacity for action as her husband's groans slowly faded away. Down, now, ordered Marta, pulling the woman down the winding stairs to the second floor. Wasting no time, they went for the bedroom, locked the door, and hurried to the connecting bathroom. Marta opened the door. Ben was quietly spread out on the floor in a drunken stupor. Whoever or whatever was in the kitchen was now making its way down the hallway and onto the staircase itself. She heard the first footstep and then turned quickly to Ben. They had to leave the farmhouse at once. Ben, Wake up! Wake up! She cried, slapping his face, but that failed to bring him around. She went over to the sink and filled the drinking glass. Throwing the water through the air, she saw it splash across her brother's face, and then he started to wake up. "Marty, baby! Marty, baby!" He smiled as the footsteps came closer. "Ben, there's a murderer downstairs," she said as the footsteps reached the landing. "Ben, we have to get out of here." "A murderer? Murderer?" he slurred as she helped him to his feet. I'll get him. No, we have to get out," said Marta. It would be more difficult now, however, as the lights in the house all went dead. The intruder had gotten to the fuse box in the landing closet. "Oh, God!" screamed Marta as she pushed on the bathroom window, raising it, and the cold air rushed inside. "We have to jump on the garage roof. It's the only way. The window slammed shut. She attempted to raise it again, but it was riveted shut. "Damn!" cried Ben as he too tried to lift it open, but with all his strength he couldn't make it move. The other room! Yelled Marta as the intruder spoke for the first time. Despite the loudness and deepness of the voice, Marta knew it well.
"Marta, I've come for you. You will join us."
"Open the damn window, Ben," she cried in panic. "I tell you, it's being held down there somehow. I raised a little, it comes slamming back down."
"The living death, the life in death. You will die, Marta. Painful death, suffering like your father below.
"Ben!"
Cut to 1,000 pieces of bloody flesh."
Ben raised his arm and cupped it inside the sleeve of his army jacket. With a vicious blow, he swung his fist directly at the panes of glass, not once but several times, but the glass wouldn't even crack. He pounded furiously at one window and then the other, but it was no use. It was as if they were in another world where the physical laws of the universe had no meaning, a world controlled and dominated by the man who was at the point of busting the door to splinters. Look, said Ben, whose sobriety improved with each passing second. "I'll decoy him. When he comes after me, I'll draw him over." "But he'll kill you," Marta exclaimed. "I've been through worse than this. Get over by the highboy. I'll hold him off, and then I'll get out of here myself. Hurry." Marta led her mother to the other side of the room, and they crouched down behind the highboy and out of the moonlight. Ben moved forward to the door and assumed a karate stance, ready to level Jamie Pendleton as he came into the bedroom. The top of the door collapsed, swinging on its hinges over into the closet. Like a creature from a child's nightmare, Jamie stood in the doorway, his eyes now constantly surrounded by red rings. Ben could see the red glow distinctly and the silhouette of Jamie's body. The frightening glow made him hesitate. Jamie kicked the bottom part of the door. Ben shouted out to him, "I'm right here, you miserable coward. Come face me like a man if you have the guts." Jamie's eyes seemed to glow even brighter, as if an all-enveloping tide of rage had filled his body. He crossed the room in short, jerky motions, his arms outstretched for Ben's neck. Ben leaped toward him, yelling something in Japanese as he delivered an assortment of karate chops, kicks to Jamie's body. Grunting and gasping like a wild boar, Jamie shunned the death-threatening blows as if they did not exist at all. Marta grasped her mother's arms, yanking across the room to the outside landing. They had escaped, but her mother began to scream, not wanting to leave her son back in the bedroom with the madman. She slipped her daughter's grip and headed back inside. Ben was in the far corner of the room now, swinging at Jamie with every last ounce of strength. But it did him no good. Jamie thrust his arms around Ben's body and squeezed. Ben kept punching, scratching, biting, and flailing Jamie in vain. But Jamie was going to squeeze the life right out of him. "Mother, no, cried Mrs. DuPont. "Leave my Ben alone." Jamie, still holding Ben, turned quickly and cast his glowing eyes upon Harriet. As Harriet rushed him, he lifted his leg high into the air. With an almost Herculean strength, he crushed his right foot into her abdomen, sending her sailing through the room. Marta screamed now, but was thinking clear enough to break the corner of the bedpost. She would use it as a club, to get her mother out of the bedroom. Jamie was just toying with Ben. In a swift motion, he lifted the body of her brother into the air, and as if he were breaking a stick of kindling, started to smash Ben over his knee. Like that piece of wood, the unbelievable force that Jamie possessed snapped Ben's body in two, severing it in a gushy thud. He took the upper half and heaved it against the far wall, spraying Marta with blood. Picking up Ben's legs, he threw the lower portion of Ben's body onto the bed. It graphically bounced up and down on the mattress. With no remorse, he turned to Marta and her mother. Marta was not screaming now. The bizarre sight of her brother cut in half left her dumbfounded. Marta lifted her mother to her feet, but Harriet was too injured to walk and probably bleeding internally now. Jamie moved in on them in the same short, jerky movements. Marta swung the bedpost club at his head several times. The impact was evident. Ben had gouged Jamie's face with bloody scratches, and the bedpost opened wounds above his eyes and broke his nose.
You cannot stop me.
He smiled confidently, like he was virtually unstoppable. Harriet collapsed and Jamie moved in. Marta tried futilely to pull her mother out of the room. Jamie thought this was terribly amusing and started laughing so loudly that his voice echoed around the entire farmhouse, filling every room with a deadly vibration. He stepped on her mother's legs as she pulled, stopping her progress for a second, but letting her pull just a little more before he stopped her again. "Let us go! Let us go! What kind of a man are you? Let us go!" she shouted, her words grinding together incoherently.
There is no escape for you, Marta. You will live to die,
he said as his face tightened and the eyes brightened. He began ruthlessly stomping on her mother's body, crushing the older woman's bones as if they were sun-dried twigs. And then he grinned, a grin of ultimate satisfaction and power. "No, no!" cried Marta as he pushed the life out of her mother's body. Once again she swung the bedpost, but he caught it with his hand and pulled it away. To her utmost horror, he commenced to pummel the older woman's body with the wood, thrashing and mashing the lifeless corpse, with her mother unquestionably dead and her brother's body in two pieces. Marta backed up. She felt her way toward the shattered door as Jamie kept hacking away at the body. He saw her, and in his furor now directed his attentions toward her. As she sprinted toward the landing, he hurled the bedpost out the door. It made a whooshing sound, narrowly missing her and slamming into the plaster to her right.
I will kill you,
he shouted, like a wild gorilla who had just left the cage. Marta leaped down 5 or 6 steps, sliding on her tailbone and tumbling head over heel to the first floor. Her out-of-control husband was now at the top of the stairs. She got to her feet, staggered for a few steps, and she rushed into the darkened kitchen. She slammed the hallway door and locked it securely. The room's only light came from the moonlight, which was spread across the kitchen table. As she moved forward, she tripped once more and fell onto a wet, sticky substance like mushy dough. She looked up in the moonlight and saw that she was lifting her hands from her father's innards, which had been hacked apart by Jamie when he first came into the house. "No, no, no!" she cried as she sprang to her feet. At that instant, Jamie reached the door, pounding and kicking it, just like the bedroom. It would only be a matter of time. She raced to the outside door and tried to turn the brass knob, but Jamie was holding it back, just like when Ben had tried to open the window. It was held with a force she was not going to overcome, but she tried anyways, punching at the glass to no avail. Something else had to be done. There were only 2 entrances to the DuPont kitchen. Jamie was in the process of smashing through one of them, and the other was locked. She merely stood in the center of the room, and thoughts of her own death were becoming more real with each blow to the door. Holy God in heaven, what do I do now? He's only a few seconds away. There is no exit. No exit. And I heard the angel of the waters say, "Just art thou in these judgments, thou who art and was, O Holy One, For men have shed the blood of saints and prophets, and thou hast given them blood to drink. It is their due. No exit. Got to fight. I have to fight him. With what? He has unfathomable strength, force. He'll crush me like he crushed them. Oh God, think quick, Marta, think quick. Dear God, let me think quick. A knife, no. He'll grab it before I can do anything. Not good enough. The closet, the axe is in the closet. Daddy's axe was always in the closet. She grasped it in both hands and pulled it out. With just enough time, she slinked across the room, positioning herself next to the door. Jamie made his final push and knocked the door into the kitchen. Her hands were clammy as she raised the axe into the air.
You cannot elude me. It is impossible, Marta. One noise, and I say you are dead,
he said as he took a full step into the room. She kept her mouth open wide so he wouldn't hear her breathing.
One noise. You make one noise, and I will put my fingers around your neck.
He was right next to her now, and she could see the glow in his eyes. At any moment he could turn and see her standing right there. Despite all that he had done, despite the power that he had to kill her, she could not bring herself to lower the axe. All the memories, all the pleasant times, all the early years were still in her mind. Under that ugly facade was the man she had married. Her legs shook now. The axe handle vibrated in her hands. She shuffled her foot to the left in order to stop the shaking. But she had hit the leg of the chair, and Jamie spun around.
There you are,
he exclaimed in a bloodthirsty growl. She let the axe go this time, with all her might thrashing through his shoulder. He hollered in pain with a thunder that shook the house. He seemed to lose whatever power he possessed. The axe embedded in his shoulder as he fell to his knees. She leaped by him, but he grabbed for her ankle. His cold hand reached around her ankle bone. She slipped away, however, and tripped toward the kitchen door.
I will get you,
he gasped.
When the time is right, I will get you.
She took the car keys from the hook next to the door and grasped the doorknob. It twisted easily, but she had to use all her strength to pull the door open. She had it open just enough to squeeze into the cold air. The door slammed shut behind her as she ran toward the station wagon, his voice still echoing loudly around the house as she slipped over the ice to the car. She was running for her life now and had to get away. To her surprise, the force, which Jamie had somehow acquired, was still present even at this distance. She had to struggle to get the car door open. Once inside, she yanked the keys from her pocket. They shook in her hands as she attempted to put them in the ignition. In front of her, the kitchen door opened wide, and Jamie, the axe still in his shoulder, hobbled outside. He lifted up his other arm and pointed at her.
I will kill you.
She dropped the keys and bent over to pick them up. Jamie kept his arm raised upward as he lumbered toward her. She grabbed the keys and put them in the ignition as he got closer. "No, go back! Go back! No! No!" she yelled as she wildly tried to start the car. The engine caught and she shifted into reverse. Jamie leaped forward, the axe in his right arm falling onto the hood of the car. He crawled toward the windshield as she backed up. Even though the car was moving, somehow he was spread eagle right over the windshield. The bloody stump where his arm had been attached was smeared across the glass. She floored the pedal and the car shot quickly into the street. Jamie had clung on and began bashing his remaining fist into the windshield. The force of his blows were still strong, and he cracked the glass, breaking it more and more until he pushed his bloodied hand through the safety glass. Marta stepped on the accelerator again and whipped the station wagon around the corner. Jamie flew off the car this time, careening and tumbling to the side of the street and into the snow. She threw the car into drive and skidded away from the horror. The farmhouse, Jamie, and the blood-covered snow faded in the rearview mirror. The detached limb, however, was still on the hood. She gasped for every breath as the limb's fingers began to move like a spider, and as it crept down the hood toward the hole in the windshield, it shot through and the hand tightened around her windpipe. The station wagon was traveling at a very fast rate now, and the hand, dripping with blood from the exposed bones, was cutting off her air. She was getting farther and farther away from the farmhouse as the car swerved along the road, but the power seemed to fade. The hand's grip grew less strenuous, and she was finally able to rip the limb from her throat. She approached the intersection to the highway and slowed the car, hurling the limb off the car. It landed next to the stop sign, and she sped away down the highway. It was 10 past 1 o'clock in the morning, and Weissman was worried. He had called the farmhouse several times during the past hour, but got a busy signal each time. He sat on the floor watching an old B movie on the television. At this late hour, he was very tired, and every so often he'd get up to check for Marta. Every time he pulled back the curtains, he could see the street below was quiet. Occasionally a dog or a cat would scurry under the streetlight, but there was no sign of Marta. The movie continued, and Weissman finally succumbed to fatigue. Marta slammed on the brakes. She quickly was out of the car and bounded up the stairs. She pounded on the door, calling Weissman's name like a maniac. Half a minute later, Weissman opened the door. He looked unsure as to what was happening. The children, still in their clothes, were out of his bedroom now, rubbing their eyes as Marta ran in hysterically, her hair frazzled, but there was no blood. "Bundles of pain, desecration, and butchery," she screamed as she ran by them into the front room. Her eyes were wide open as she hurried up to the sofa and leaped at the drapes, pulling them from their housing. The experience had broken her mind, and she fell forward, hitting the floor with a thud. "Mommy, what's the matter with Mommy?" "Nothing, nothing," Weissman told the boy. He ran to Marta and bent over her sprawled body. "Marta, can you hear me?" he said as he cupped her head in his hands. He slowly opened her eyes. She didn't seem to know where she was. "The power. He had the power. He's the devil. The devil," she yelled crazily. "The living dead," mumbled Weissman under his breath as she fell back into his arms and lost consciousness. The children began crying. "What's wrong with Mommy?" "Mommy is sick. Mommy's sick," said Weissman as he grabbed a cushion from the sofa and placed it under Marta's head. "I want you kids to go back in the bedroom, get some blankets, and let's go to sleep. Everybody will sleep, including your mother." They ran from the room, and Weissman picked up the telephone. He thumbed through the telephone book and quickly dialed the town hospital.
"Douglas Memorial, Nurse Scott, may I help you?"
"Yeah, this is Bernie Weissman," he said, looking at Marta on the floor. "I need an ambulance sent out to my apartment. This is an emergency." "Yes, of course, Bernie. You're in that yellow building across from the church, right?" Right. "Well, I'll have to," she said as she spoke away from the receiver. "Dr. Andrews, an emergency at Bernie Weissman's house."
"Hello, Dr. Andrews here,"
he said as he took the telephone. "Steve, it's Bernie Weissman. Marta Pendleton just came running into my apartment. She's delirious and passed out."
"She breathing?"
asked Andrews as the children came into the room with pillows and blankets. "Yeah, it's like her mind just snapped." "Keep her warm and elevate her feet. The ambulance will be on its way. We'll have trained personnel inside, Bernie. I'll be right at the emergency entrance when she arrives. Just do what I say until they get there." My Other Face, Chapter 15. Sometimes I believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Lewis Carroll. The town's clock tower, a mile in the distance, had just sounded at the mid-hour. It was 4:30, and Dr. Andrews stepped from the side room. A nurse woke up Weissman and told him Andrews was ready to see him. "Steve," called Weissman as he walked from the lobby. "Over here," said the doctor as he leaned against the wall. He pinched the bridge of his nose. He had obviously had a grueling few hours. "Steve, what happened?" asked Weissman as he came over. "It's been a long night, Bernie," he confessed as he blinked his eyes. "Well, where is she?" He looked into the side room. "She's been downstairs in the clinic for a couple of hours. She woke about an hour ago. I've spent that time trying to carefully piece this together with the assistance of Dr. Casey. By phone, of course. This whole thing, Marta," he said, taking a deep breath, claims her husband murdered the entire DuPont family in quite graphic fashion. Oh, God, said Weissman as he threw his hands up in the air. I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know what's going on here, Steve. I just don't understand this. Neither do I, Bernie. But Casey is the chief psychologist here, and he told me that her problem is extremely complex. He says, and I concur, that Marta believes that she really saw her family murdered out at the farm tonight. Did you call Hastings? No, why should I? Well, what if they really were murdered? She's suffering from delusions. She told Casey about her flashes and other things that she saw. What makes you think this is any different, Bernie? So you're saying that she has no credence at all? Asked Weissman. I say simply, let's just look at her past performance since she's arrived in St. Argus, Andrews told him. Never mind her past instability. I'm going to call Hastings, Weissman proclaimed as he headed toward the pay telephone. With Andrews watching, he dialed Hastings' home number. The chief's wife answered from their bed, and a few seconds later, Hastings came on the line. But Weissman kept talking, telling the chief what had just happened.
She said what?
Exploded Hastings. You heard me, Dan. They're all dead, according to Marta.
Haven't you heard the story about the little boy who cried wolf, Bernie? How many times are you going to listen to her? For God's sakes, go home and get some sleep.
I'm going out there right now, Dan. If I find anything, including anything she might have done, I'll be sure to mention it to the media when they swarm all over this town. I'll mention how the town's police chief slept through it all as a house full of people were butchered.
Put Andrews on the phone.
Dr. Andrews here.
Steve, does her story hold water?
I personally don't think so, Dan, but...
Aha, that's what I thought.
Clamored Hastings. But it is possible.
Tell Weissman to give me 10 minutes. I'll be down at the hospital to pick him up. Have him be out front.
Right, said Andrews as he hung up the telephone. Daybreak was only a short time away as Hastings sped his cruiser down the highway. Andrews had related every detail of Marta's story to Weissman, who in turn informed the flustered Hastings. They neared the intersection of the highway and the road to the farmhouse. Hastings turned on the high beams and then pulled over near the stop sign. Weissman, desperately trying to vindicate Marta, leaped from the car and wandered over to the sign. Hastings shined the spotlight to the spot where Marta said the arm of her husband had been thrown from the car. "This is bullshit, you know," shouted Hastings as Weissman searched the area. "I don't see a damn thing," Weissman confessed. "Nothing." "Come on, Weissman, if there was a limb out there, you'd see it. Now get back in the car. Let's go wake the DuPonts." Hastings spun the tires and left rubber on the road as they proceeded directly to the farmhouse. Weissman went over the story one final time, but Hastings was still very skeptical. "What about the kids, Bernie?" "The kids are in a room in a basement clinic. Don't worry about the kids, Dan." "You know what I mean. If we don't find anything out there, and we won't, it means once and for all, Marta Pendleton is nuts. Nuts, Weissman. Flaco. Gonzo." Weissman did not bother responding. He just stared out at the purple-hued fields as the pre-dawn shadows cast an innocent beginning to the day. He could genuinely feel the wayward isolation of the little town. For years he had been trapped up here, looking for that elusive, small-town togetherness, the cohesiveness, the network of interdependence, as the textbooks called it, but he never found it, or anything close to it. In fact, the decaying, closely packed city had given him more togetherness with his fellow human beings. In St. Argus, he had found divergent interests of power from the Pendletons on down to the poorest farmer. "Well, it looks quiet enough out here," said Hastings as he glanced at the farmhouse. "I don't see any bodies lying in the snow, Bernie, and the house looks just fine." "You don't know that for sure," replied Weissman, who now didn't even believe his own words. Hastings turned into the dirt driveway. There was no blood or shattered glass. If anything did happen outside, it had been cleverly covered over. The chief pulled up to the kitchen door and shut off the car. "I don't relish the fact of waking Al DuPont," he said as he stepped into the cool morning air. "Unless they're all dead, Bernie," he said sarcastically. "Let's just get in there, all right?" said Weissman as they crossed the ice to the front door. "Let me just tell you something. This is the absolute last time I'm going through this for that woman," Hastings told him. He turned and rapped on the kitchen door. They waited in silence, and their breath was white in the early morning cold. Inside, there appeared to be some noise, like someone shuffling toward the door. To no surprise to Hastings, the curtains were pulled back, and the block-faced jar of Albert DuPont stared out at them. He twisted the deadbolt and removed the chain as he opened the door.
"What do you people want?"
he said with no inflection in his voice. "Hey, Al, can we talk to you for a second?" smiled Hastings, trying to be as amicable as possible at that early hour. He looked over to Weissman with an expression of smug delight, knowing he had been right about Marta all along.
"Why have you come out here at this time of the morning?"
"Why? Come on, Al, it's cold out here. We'll just be a few minutes," Hastings complained as he pushed his way inside. They entered the kitchen and DuPont slammed the door shut. The kitchen showed no signs of struggle. There was no blood or broken or scattered furniture, no dead, mutilated bodies. In fact, all was in order, just the way Mrs. DuPont always kept it. Hastings furrowed his brow. Now he had to explain why they had just burst into the farmhouse at 4:45 in the morning. As he was about to speak, all the others of the family filed into the room like wooden soldiers, very much alive with deadly serious expressions. "Oh boy," exclaimed Hastings as he saw them.
"Marta isn't in bed.
Said Jamie with no emotion.
Has something happened to Marta?"
"What makes you say that, Jamie?" asked Weissman, who was amazed by their collective sour dispositions.
"Because she is missing,"
replied Jamie as if he was becoming angry. "She could be right here in the house for all you people know," yelled Weissman. Okay, said Hastings. "We know where she is. Look, Al, that's why I've come out here, because of Marta," he confessed, and they just stared at him like figures on a Grant Wood painting. "I don't think the details are necessary, Dan," said Weissman as he attempted to protect Marta. "We surely can see things are okay out here. Let's get back into town."
"What does he mean, things are all right?"
asked DuPont as if he were trying to provoke Weissman. "He means your daughter had another one of her flashes," said the chief. Once again, they showed little concern for what he said. "I said she just had another flash."
"What did she see?"
asked Jamie with a slight grin. "Oh, well, she claims," began Hastings, not knowing how to word it. She claims that you were all murdered."
"I hardly think so,"
said Jamie.
"And just who did the killing?"
he asked, and kept an eye on Weissman's reaction. "Well, she said that you did the killing," said Hastings. Jamie smiled wider than before, but in a frozen, immovable grin, and then his face reverted back to its serious demeanor.
"I killed us all, did I? I do think it is time for the sanitarium. Dear little Marta has to be put away for her own good."
"Cutting her off will do nothing but hurt her," cried Weissman as he stepped forward. He was incensed at their attitudes. "She needs long, methodical treatment and understanding."
"In the sanitarium,"
said Janie, provoking Weissman even more. "Locking her up won't do that. Why don't you have a little bit more compassion for her and stop thinking about how you will be affected, Jamie?"
"That is none of your business,"
replied Jamie. "Come on, Bernie," Hastings said as he broke up the argument.
"Back to town and leave Marta to us. Where is she being held?"
"At the clinic on the lower floor of the hospital," volunteered Hastings.
"Good. We will discuss her problem with the doctors."
Yeah, Andrews admitted her last night, but Casey is handling everything, said Hastings.
You have been very helpful. We appreciate your coming over here.
Right, said Hastings, glad they were not more upset. He did not want his image in the town to be tarnished. Come on, Bernie, let's go, he said as he took a few steps toward the door. But Weissman was distraught now with the whole scene. He just stood there gawking as they all remained lined up in the kitchen. Bernie, I said, let's get out of here. Weissman bit on his lip and looked down at the floor. He walked right by Hastings, opened the door, and headed for the cruiser. Hastings bade them goodbye. He followed Weissman outside, shutting the door as he walked into the first rays of sunlight. Weissman sat rigidly as he waited for Hastings. Nice morning. I love to watch the sunrise. He started the car and then got back to more immediate matters. And just what the hell is the matter with you, Bernie? Me? What's wrong with them? Did you see them? It's 5 o'clock in the morning. What the hell do you want? They're tired and probably pissed off. Pissed off? Yeah, that's a good one. They got nothing to be pissed off about. And the way they tried to bait me, especially him. Like he really enjoyed getting me mad. Jamie Pendleton never acted that way, and neither did they. They're all good people. Weissman, said Hastings as he backed up, you better check yourself into that clinic. You're doing anything you can in order to rationalize Marta's behavior. Inside the farmhouse, Jamie Pendleton slowly made his way to the staircase, followed by the rest of them. They walked in a mesmerized state, evidencing short, deliberate motions.
You know it was a mistake,
said Albert DuPont.
It was unfortunate,
said Jamie as he climbed ahead of them.
You had her cornered,
said Ben.
I should have killed her when I had the chance,
Jamie replied.
She must live to die,
said Mrs. DuPont.
She will, said Jamie. Tonight, when the time is right, at the plant, Marta will die a painful and prolonged death. She will live to die.
Weissman fought to keep his eyelids open as Hastings brought the cruiser up the Church Hill Road. The DuPont station wagon was parked in a diagonal position across the road. There was nothing wrong with the station wagon. It was pristine, like it had just been through the car wash, and the windshield, which Marta had seen smashed by a severed arm, was in perfect condition. Well, there's the final catch, Bernie. Nothing wrong with the car, is there? Said Hastings as he pulled alongside of it. Where's the broken glass? And the blood? Just a little speck of it. Let me see it. By this time, Weissman was tired of listening to Hastings. He just wanted to sleep and didn't even bother responding to the insinuations. Going down to get the kids after I get a few hours sleep, he told Hastings and squinted several times. You what? You have no authority to get those kids. Well, I most certainly do. Marta told me last night. She wants the kids to stay over my apartment because she didn't trust Jamie. She's a nut. It's incompetent. What do you think Jamie is going to say when he finds out you yanked his kids to your apartment? I'll just have to deal with that problem, won't I, Dan? Okay. But I've heard nothing. I'm staying clear of this deal. If you want to take the guy's kids, then you'll have to deal with him. I don't want anything to do about this whole thing. Good, said Weissman as he opened the car door and slammed it. The cold air tingled his face, waking him a bit as he headed inside to get some rest. He felt as confused as Marta herself. She had told this incredible story of murder to Dr. Andrews. She had come screaming into the apartment as if it had really happened, yet he was unnerved by Jamie's apparent disgruntled demeanor, and the rest of them out there walking and talking as if they were under some great restraint from a far superior force, a force he could not identify, a force he was unsure he wanted to match wits against, if it existed at all. Several hours of sleep could help him decide that question. Back at the clinic, The morning staff was just coming on duty. Marta lay sleeping in a room down the hallway from the nurse's station, but the children were already awake, getting dressed in an adjacent room. They were told to do so by the man who stood in the tiny lobby to the rear of the nurse's station. James Pendleton I had somehow learned that his up to now unseen grandchildren were at the clinic. He stood stoically, his face filled with the same deadly seriousness as Jamie and the DuPonts. "Mr. Pendleton," said the nurse as she came in from the other room. "Children will be ready shortly. They're almost dressed. We'll bring them out."
I cannot wait all day. I want those children brought out right now.
"Yes, sir. They will be brought out right now," she said as she ran back. Like everyone in town, she feared the Pendletons, and his disposition only added to that fear. Within seconds, the children, their sneakers not yet tied, walked into the lobby. They were still sleepy-eyed. They recognized the man in front of them as the same man in Jamie's photo albums. Pendleton came over to them and grasped their hands tightly. His hands were freezing cold as he looked down at them.
I am your paternal grandfather, children.
"Where's Mommy?" asked the little girl as she became frightened of the crusty old man and his frozen grip. "Uncle Bernie, where's Uncle Bernie?" asked Mitchie.
Never mind them.
Yelled Pendleton as he pulled them away.
You are coming with me, and that is final.
The nurse was aghast at the old man's brutal behavior, and she stomped back to the station. An older nurse was going through reports as Pendleton brought the children down the corridor leading to the first floor stairs. "I just can't believe old man Pendleton's attitude. He absolutely has no consideration for those kids. Just because his name is Pendleton, he can blow up right in here and take whatever he wants." "Well, Dr. Casey said to let him take the children," said the older nurse. "Or you could take your complaint to the board of trustees at the hospital. But you know who chairs the board."